Hi, Dr. Patrick Gentempo here, and thank you for joining us on our YouTube channel. We have great content in store for you. I'm so excited to be here with you, and let's jump right into it.
I went to a lecture by a scientist who was a genetic engineer blowing the whistle on the technology. He was very intimately connected with the process of genetic engineering and knew that the most common result was surprise side effects. So we knew that the technology was not ready for prime time, certainly not ready to put into the food supply, where everyone who eats could be affected negatively. And he knew that the level of evaluations of the GMOs in terms of its impact on health was incredibly superficial. He also was aware that once you put the genes out there in the terms of the crops, they'll cross-pollinate, they'll mix, and there's no recall. So we're permanently changing the gene pool of all future generations, affecting everyone who eats. And this was in 1996, just before they were about to plant GMOs in the state that I was living in Iowa, in a vast way, and hardly anyone knew about it. So my background is as a communicator, a strategic communicator, educator, etc. And I realized this guy speaking science is not going to make it into the decision makers' thinking. It's not going to get out. What I need to do is help translate the science into English, into words that people understand, and maybe that'll help. So I had this idea of how we could help, and I've been doing that ever since, translating science into English. And I've spoken to scientists all over the world, and that's in my books and movies and articles, etc. And it turns out that if you translate it, you take the mystery out of these GMOs that are supposed to be all, safe and whatnot, and you realize actually these guys are totally off base. They have no idea what the impacts will be. It's all based mostly on assumptions, and most of the fundamental assumptions used as the basis for safety claims turn out to be false. So when you get into the details and you explain it so that everyone can understand, you're not just like, trust us, we're experts, then real people realize, no way do I want to put that in my mouth. And so the strategy which we at the Institute for Responsible Technology have undertaken was to use behavior change messaging. What is it that you need to know so that you are really convinced you better not put this in your mouth, especially your children's mouth, if at all possible? And so we made that very public and very popular, and as a result now a tipping point of consumer rejection is underway in the United States, where more and more companies are eliminating GMOs because they're becoming a marketing liability.
So we're at the tipping point now. This is 21 years after you start your journey.
It took a little longer than I thought.
Yeah, and I was about to say, what were your expectations in the beginning? Did you think that pretty immediately there'd be an outrage about it, or did you think it was going to be a long road?
Well, I didn't think I'd be here 21 years later. I figured getting the information to key people. But then as I looked into it, a lot of those key people had already been turned, biased, or bought off. I think you probably know that the person in charge of policy at the FDA was Monsanto's former attorney, Michael Taylor, later Monsanto's vice president, then back at the FDA as the US Food Czar. He was put there because the White House had instructed the FDA to promote GMOs. And so the whole thing was a rigged game from the beginning. So based on a single sentence of the FDA policy, where it claimed that they didn't see any significant difference between GMOs and non-GMOs, they allowed Monsanto to put GMOs in the market without a single safety study. And so you don't even have to tell the FDA that you're putting a GMO on the market according to that policy. The same company that told us that DDT and Agent Orange and PCBs were safe can determine the safety of the food. And it turns out that the sentence upon which the entire policy was created was a lie. The overwhelming consensus among the scientists working at the FDA was that GMOs were different and dangerous and needed to be tested. So the entire approval and promotion of GMOs was based on industry manipulation and political collusion.
And over these decades of collusion, is any of this coming to see the light of day from a legal or legislative side, not just on the consumer revolution side?
Well, legal and legislative, not so much. It's interesting. A friend of mine was filing a class action against Monsanto. It was turned down. After the whole thing ended, the New York Times outed the judge. The judge never admitted or acknowledged that he was actually Monsanto's attorney in the previous life, and that was their, judge. There was the attorney on record, and never mentioned it, never recused himself. Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court, former Monsanto attorney, wrote the position for the majority of a decision that was in favor of Monsanto. So there's a lot of there's a lot of legislative tinkering. We have won some. Center for Food Safety has done a great job of stopping at one point the alfalfa, which then got reversed. They stopped the pharmaceutical crops in Hawaii and other things. So we have had rulings go our way. If you look at a strategic understanding of GMOs in terms of fighting against GMOs, there's two basic philosophies. Contain or eliminate. Contain is try and prevent the next approval, or try and not in my backyard, or GM-free zones, like we're in Sonoma County, it's GM-free zone, or eliminate GMOs. And that's what the Institute for Responsible Technology is focused on. Let's eliminate all GMOs. They shouldn't be in the food supply. They shouldn't be released outdoors. Maybe someday they can manipulate genes in a way that's predictable and precise, that they can benefit in human health and the environment. But we're nowhere near that day. We have so many untested assumptions, and so many of the assumptions have been proven false.
I was going to say the assumptions were bigger crop yields, no adverse effects. So what do you see? Because here's some of the things, even people who've been in this docuseries, some have said, well, GMOs in and of themselves, I don't think present a problem. It's just the glyphosate that they spray on is the problem. What's your opinion on that?
All right, so Seralini, a French toxicologist, and his team studied Roundup-ready corn engineered not to die when sprayed with Roundup herbicide. And they fed it to rats, and the rats had multiple massive tumors. They died earlier. They had organ damage, liver, kidneys, pituitary. So what was it? Was it the glyphosate? Was it the Roundup as a whole, or was it the GMO? Well, they designed the study to help find that out. In addition to the group of rats that ate the sprayed corn, another group of rats ate the corn that was never sprayed, just the GMO. And they also had multiple massive tumors, early death, and organ damage. So you'd think, it's the GMO. But another group was fed Roundup in the drinking water without the GMO corn, and they also had multiple massive tumors, early death, and organ damage. So was it the food, or was it the spray? Yes,
yeah, all
it was both, exactly. Now, if you took the Roundup-ready corn, what could possibly be wrong with that? Well, they put this out on the market without doing the close evaluation of what actually gets damaged and changed as a result of the process of genetic engineering. Michael Antonio and others, a scientist from London, he actually analyzed the full protein expression and the metabolite expression of these Roundup-ready corn kernels, and found there were over 200 proteins and metabolites that were different than the same corn that had been not GMO'd. Now, the difference among those over 200, some of them we don't know. We don't know the impact, but for two we do. Putrescine and cadaverine. Think of those names.
Yeah, I was going to say putrid and cadavers.
Exactly. They are the elements that cause foul, rotting dead bodies to smell.
Right.
Okay? They're in higher levels in the Roundup-ready corn. And they're linked to allergies and cancer. So you're eating the Roundup-ready corn, you might end up with allergic reactions, you might end up with cancer, whether or not it's been sprayed. Another BT toxin corn, a corn that produces its own toxic insecticide that breaks open the holes of the walls of the guts of insects to kill them. In addition to that toxin, and we can talk about the dangers there, it also has a new allergen. The gene was already in the corn, but it was never switched on until the process of genetic engineering caused that change. So the process of genetic engineering causes massive collateral damage in the DNA. Hundreds or thousands of mutations up and down the DNA, changes in gene expression in dozens or 100 or more different genes, and that's the result of the side effects of genetic engineering. The most clear result, the most clear example of this was done by Dr. Arpad Pusztai, and he was working in Aberdeen at the Rowett Institute. And he took potatoes engineered to produce an insecticide and fed them to rats. But he fed another group of rats natural potatoes. Another group of rats were fed natural potatoes plus the same insecticide that the GMO potato produced in the same quantity. So we had natural, GMO, and natural plus the insecticide. Only the rats fed the GMO showed potentially precancerous cell growth in their digestive system, smaller brains, livers, and testicles, partial atrophy of the liver, and damaged immune system.
Wow.
It was not the insecticide. So what was it? It was the process of genetic engineering
Thanks so much for being here and watching that video. And can I ask you to please subscribe to our channel so you can find out when we're posting new content. You'll be alerted right away when we do. To share this with people you think might benefit from the information, and certainly it helps us if you like the video. So if you like what you just saw, go ahead and hit that like button. And again, thank you so much for being here with me right now.